All right, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture this. It's 1993, and you're sitting in a booth at a Denny's diner in San Jose, California. Across from you are three founders literally sketching out their entire future on a paper napkin.
And get this, they've got exactly $40,000 to their name. That is their entire starting capital. No product, no customers, no office, literally nothing but a whole lot of stubborn conviction about where the future of computing was going to go. Now hit fast forward 32 years. That one completely non-consensus bet, it turned into $4 trillion. $4 trillion! We are talking about a company that is now worth more than Apple, more than Microsoft, and honestly, more than the entire gross domestic product of most countries on Earth. It's absolutely wild. This is the story of NVIDIA.
Section 1. The Denny's Napkin Bet.
To really wrap our heads around this phenomenal rise, we've got to talk about the incredibly resilient mind behind it all, Jensen Huang. When you trace his early life, it's just pure, unfiltered grit. Born in Taiwan in 1963, his family moves to Thailand, and then in 1972, at just 9 years old, he's sent alone to America. He actually ends up at a boarding school in Kentucky that was basically a reform school for troubled teens. So here he is, speaking broken English, getting bullied relentlessly. But instead of breaking, you know what he does? He adapts. He strikes a deal with his illiterate 17-year-old roommate. Jensen teaches the guy how to read, and in exchange, the roommate teaches Jensen how to bench press. He literally found the opportunity in the room. And it's exactly that kind of grit that propelled him to Stanford, then to AMD, LSI Logic, right up until 1993, when at 30 years old, he finally founds NVIDIA.
Oh, and the name, Jensen, and his two co-founders, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem, they needed a name for the startup, so they went with NVIDIA, which is literally the Latin word for envy. Pretty bold name for what was about to become a wildly bold company.
Which brings us to Section 2, a near-death experience.
Because look, the path to $4 trillion was definitely not a straight line. By 1994, they hit the absolute abyss. Their very first product, the NV1, almost killed the entire company. It was a massive $7 million mistake. They had managed to secure life-changing capital from Sega to build a chip for the Dreamcast console, but they totally bet on the wrong horse. The rest of the graphics industry was standardizing around Microsoft's new triangle-based rendering, but NVIDIA, they stubbornly stuck to their own proprietary technology. The chip totally failed, the Sega deal was on thin ice, and they were staring straight down the barrel of bankruptcy.
But this, right here, this is where we see the absolute power of radical transparency. Instead of spinning some polished PR story, Jensen picks up the phone and calls the CEO of Sega directly. He admits total failure, he tells Sega they need to go find another partner immediately, and then, this is the crazy part, he actually asked to keep the $7 million anyway, just so NVIDIA wouldn't go under. And remarkably, Sega said yes.
So what do they do with that lifeline? They pivot, and they pivot hard. They hold on to the Sega capital, and instead of wasting time on an expensive, ground-up chip redesign, Jensen takes this massive 50-50 gamble. He buys a hardware emulator to speed up the whole process. And man, it worked. In 1997, they launched the Riva 128. It performed 4 times better than the competition, it was fully compatible with the Microsoft standard, and it sold over 1 million units in just 4 months. That one incredible triumph paved the way straight to their 1999 IPO on the NASDAQ.
Moving on to Section 3, the billion-dollar gamble. Fast forward to the mid-2000s. NVIDIA is doing great. They're this highly respected, profitable gaming GPU company. But Jensen was about to do something that Wall Street completely, fundamentally misunderstood. In 2006, they launched CUDA. That stands for Compute Unified Device Architecture. Basically, it's a software platform that lets developers use NVIDIA's graphics chips for general computing, not just for making video games look cool. Jensen poured over $1 billion into this. And the wildest part? There wasn't even a clear customer base yet. He was entirely inspired by university researchers who were basically hacking consumer gaming GPUs to run crazy complex scientific physics and molecular simulations.
So you can probably guess how Wall Street reacted, right? Total disconnect. The financial analysts are demanding immediate revenue, calling CUDA a horribly expensive mistake. They're looking at NVIDIA like, why on earth is a gaming company spending billions on software for scientists? But Jensen wasn't looking at the next quarter. He was looking at the future. He realized that the exact same architecture used to process millions of pixels on a screen at once is exactly what makes GPUs absolutely perfect for running massive mathematical computations in parallel.
Section 4,
the AI explosion.
You know, for almost 10 straight years, CUDA looked like a billion-dollar blunder. That is, until the AI explosion hit and proved Jensen spectacularly right. When you track the timeline, this shift is just seismic. We start with the CUDA launch in 2006, crickets for a while. Then, in 2012, Geoffrey Hinton's team at the University of Toronto uses NVIDIA GPUs and CUDA to train AlexNet. They completely crushed the competition in image recognition. That was the aha moment. That proved deep learning actually worked on GPUs. And then, a decade later, November 2022, OpenAI drops ChatGPT. It hits a record-breaking 100 million users in just 2 months. Practically overnight, every single company on planet Earth realized they needed AI.
And since roughly 90% of all AI training was running on NVIDIA hardware, their financials just went totally parabolic. Look at this. Full-year revenue skyrocketed from $27 billion in fiscal year 2023 to an unbelievable $130 billion in fiscal year 2025. I mean, that is a historic acceleration in a 2-year span. Just incredible.
And this literally rewrote the company's DNA. Their data center division, which, remember, was essentially built on the back of that expensive mistake, CUDA software, generated a massive $115 billion. Compare that to the tiny $15 billion slice from the original gaming industry they were built for. The quirky side project completely, utterly dwarfed their core business.
To put the sheer scale of this success into perspective, by July 2025, this little startup born in a Denny's became the very first $4 trillion company in history. They are literally operating at a scale larger than the entire GDP of the United Kingdom, and they're right on the heels of Japan and Germany. Oh, and they are definitely not slowing down. Just recently, in Q3 of fiscal year 2026, their brand new Blackwell GPU ramped up to $11 billion in sales in its very first quarter. That drove a record-shattering $57 billion quarter overall. Mind-blowing.
Section 5. Lessons for the future.
All right, so what can we actually take away from this wild corporate thriller? Let's rapidly synthesize this into 5 core lessons you can apply to your own journey. First, you've got to bet on non-consensus ideas early, just like Jensen did when CPUs ruled the world. Second, admit your mistakes fast. Radical transparency literally saved them from bankruptcy. Third, invest heavily in unseen infrastructure. Fourth, patience compounds. Remember, there was a 10-year gap between AlexNet and ChatGPT where Jensen just held the line while everyone laughed at him. And fifth, own the full stack. It makes you impossible to copy. Jensen inherently understood that the platform you meticulously build during the slow times is exactly what will save you when things speed up.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final question to chew on. What is your billion-dollar non-consensus bet? Because NVIDIA's success, it wasn't luck. It was the result of an unyielding, absolute conviction in an idea that no one else could see yet. Think about the radical ideas you might be holding back on right now. Who knows? Maybe it's time to find a napkin and start sketching.